Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never imagined silence could feel so heavy, like a coat I couldn't shrug off. But that night, when Emma looked at me with those distant blue eyes that once held warmth, I understood something quietly devastating. I wasn't needed anymore. Not in her laughter. Not in her plans. Not even in her home. The home we'd built together. And that realization settled in my chest like a cold stone I'd been carrying for years without noticing. It didn't start with anything dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors, no broken plates. It began with small, almost invisible shifts. Emma used to greet me at the door with a smile that felt like sunlight after a long day. But gradually, the smile faded into a nod, then a distracted, "Hey!" Then nothing. She'd walk past me, phone in hand, lost in some world I wasn't invited into. I kept telling myself it was work stress or a phase, or maybe even my own paranoia. But my heart kept whispering a truth I didn't want to hear. The distance grew like ivy, creeping over everything we shared. Meals together became rare. Conversations turned into quick exchanges about bills, schedules, errands, nothing that touched the heart. And intimacy that became a ghost between us. She'd turn away in bed, her back a wall I couldn't climb. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we'd gone from two people who couldn't keep their hands off each other to strangers sharing oxygen. I tried. God knows I tried. Planned small date nights. Left notes on the counter. Cooked her favorite meals. But every effort felt like a stone skipping across a frozen lake. Never sinking in, never making a difference. The final blow came on a Tuesday night when I returned home early. I found her sitting on the couch, staring at her phone with a faint smile, the kind I hadn't seen in months. The moment she noticed me, the smile vanished, replaced by irritation, as if my presence had ruined something. She didn't explain. I didn't ask. That silence between us became its own language. The days that followed were mechanical. We moved like two people stuck in a contract, not a marriage. I kept thinking she'd snap out of it, that we'd talk, that she'd reach for me the way she once did. But nothing came, and slowly, heartbreak stopped feeling like pain and began feeling like clarity. The night I left, it wasn't planned. There was no grand epiphany, just a moment, simple, quiet, and painfully honest. Emma walked past me in the hallway without looking up from her phone, brushed my shoulder lightly, and said, "Can you not hover? I need space." Her voice wasn't angry. It was dismissive, detached, final. I stood there, heartbeat slowing, something in me untangling. I realized she didn't fear losing me. She didn't even think about the possibility. And it hit me. When someone stops noticing your presence, the most dignified thing you can do is offer them your absence. So I packed lightly, just essentials. No dramatic suitcase dragging. No note. No confrontation. I moved quietly, almost respectfully, like I was stepping out of a room where the lights had already gone out. When I opened the front door, I paused for a moment, listening to the soften of the home we once loved. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It hadn't for a long time. I closed the door softly behind me and walked into the cool night. The air tasted different. Sharper, clearer, cleaner. My footsteps felt foreign, like I was learning how to move again. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew what I was leaving behind. A version of myself that had stayed too long, hoping for something that wasn't coming back. What surprised me was the absence of anger. No bitterness. No rage. Just a quiet ache mixed with unexpected relief. I checked into a small motel a few miles away. White sheets, dim lamp, a room that didn't know my past. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, and exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for months. For the first time in a long time, the silence felt kind. I didn't reach out to Emma. Didn't check if she noticed. Didn't wait for a message that might never come. I just sat with myself, letting the loneliness unravel. I slept deeply that night, deeper than I had in years, and woke up feeling strangely lighter, like someone had opened a window inside my chest. But peace is a fragile thing, and it didn't last long. Because the next evening, just as the sun dipped behind the motel roof, someone knocked on my door, softly at first, then again, trembling. When I opened it, Emma was standing there, and her eyes, they weren't distant anymore. They were flooded. Tears clung to her lashes, her breath shaking as if she'd run miles. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked into a whisper that clung to the air between us. "You were always home." Emma stood there like someone who had just woken up from a dream and found the world burning around them. Her hair was messy, her eyes red, her lips trembling like she couldn't hold the words in any longer. But even then, I didn't speak first. I just stepped back and let her enter, because some moments don't need questions. They answer themselves. She walked inside slowly, as if the room might reject her. Her gaze swept over the plain walls, the cheap bedding, the worn carpet, and something in her softened. Maybe she'd expected anger. Maybe she'd expected a dramatic exit. But the simplicity of my absence was louder than any outburst could have been. She turned toward me with a breath that sounded almost painful. "Why did you leave like that?" she whispered. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let the silence do the talking, the same silence she'd given me for months. She swallowed hard, then looked down at her hands as if searching for courage in her own skin. "I thought you were just giving me space," she said. "I thought you were mad. I thought you were... I don't know. I didn't think you'd actually walk out." That sentence alone showed everything. She didn't think I'd go. She didn't think I could. I was the constant she took for granted, the porch light that always stayed on, even when she stopped coming home. "Emma," I finally said, my voice calm but not cold, "you asked for space. I gave you what you wanted." Her head snapped up, eyes shining. "Not like that." "How else?" I asked. "You didn't talk to me. You didn't look at me. You smiled at your phone more than you smiled at me. You walked past me like I was furniture." I let out a slow breath. "I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because staying hurt me." The words landed heavier than I expected. Emma closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek, like a confession she couldn't verbalize. She sat on the edge of the bed where I'd slept the night before, her hands shaking as she laced her fingers together. "I messed up," she whispered. "I really messed up." I didn't move closer, didn't reach out. I needed to hear what she had to say without being the one to pull it out of her. She looked up at me again, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I fell in love with, the one who felt deeply, who fought for us, who cared. Her voice cracked. "I've been overwhelmed, and I shut down. I stopped paying attention. I stopped being your partner. And the stupid part is, I didn't even notice how far I'd pulled away until I realized you weren't coming home." There was a long pause, and then she whispered, "The moment I saw your empty closet, everything hit me, and I felt this terror, like the floor had disappeared." I let her speak, let her fill the space with the truth she'd avoided for months. "I know you don't trust my words right now," she said quietly, "and I don't blame you. But I came here because I needed you to know that I see it. I see what I did. I see what I made you endure. And I'm sorry." Her voice cracked again. "I'm so sorry." Apologies have a different weight when they're soaked in sincerity, and her voice carried that weight. Still, an apology wasn't enough to rebuild everything she dismantled with indifference. "Why now?" I asked simply. Her answer was a breath, not a sentence. "Because losing you felt real." There was something heartbreaking in that honesty. Not because she suddenly loved me more, but because she finally realized what she'd been risking. Sometimes people don't understand the value of warmth until they feel the cold. Emma stood up slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She stepped closer, not enough to assume, just enough to let me see the fear in her expression. "I'm not asking you to come back tonight," she said, "or tomorrow. I'm not asking for forgiveness, like it's something I'm entitled to." She shook her head. "I just needed you to know that I found my way back to us. And I hope it's not too late." Her voice faltered again as she repeated the sentence that had broken me open at the door. "You were always home." The words lingered in the room, settling between us like a fragile offering. I looked at her for a long moment, letting the emotion behind everything sink in. And slowly, I felt some of the tightness in my chest ease. Not because everything was fixed, but because something was finally acknowledged. "Emma," I said quietly, "I'm not sure where we go from here, but for the first time in months, we're talking. And that matters." She nodded, more tears falling. But this time they didn't feel like endings. They felt like beginnings, raw, uncertain, but real. We didn't hug. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises we weren't ready to keep. Instead, we stood there in silent understanding, knowing the road ahead would take work, honesty, and effort from both sides. But at least now, for the first time in a long time, we weren't walking it alone.